Good morning, everyone. I'm Vallabhi Jalan, the convener for this evening on behalf of the collective Curating for Culture. Before we get started, may I please request you all to ensure that your devices are on mute, your WhatsApp tab on the browser is closed, and any electronic devices around you are on silent or no sound mode. These sessions are being recorded and screenshots will be taken for documentation and dissemination purposes. Hope we have your consent for the same. If it is convenient for you, we request that the participants may keep their videos on during the session. Also, to avoid any disturbance during the talk, I'll be sharing a Google Doc link where you can put in your thoughts and questions. I would now request Ishita to tell us about today's plan and introduce us to the speaker.
Hi guys, sorry for that little bit of silence. I was just trying to switch on the mobile phone. Good morning to you all. We're missing a few participants, but we'll get started. And I'm very happy to have Anuja Ghosalkar with us today, conducting and facilitating this workshop on narrative building. We all know about curating for culture, so I'm going to skip that. About Anuja, I'm again going to skip the formal introduction. You all have read it. I'm just going to share a little experience of knowing Anuja, which is very early on in Bangalore. One is looking for some form of recreation or art and culture space because in Bangalore, I was in north of Bangalore. And people from Bangalore would be able to relate, not everybody. That's not a place where you have things happening yet. You only get to reach the airport close by. But there's a very interesting space over there. I don't know if it still operates, but it does art residencies called Jamun. And that's where I happened to see Anuja's performance on Lady Anandi. I didn't even know what I was getting into. It was complete surprise, but for a newbie in Bangalore, it was such an interesting exposure to know how somebody could work with historical narratives and create a performance which appeals to so many different kinds of audiences. And thereafter, we had a wonderful dialogue with Anuja telling us about the whole process. So since then, I've been wanting to learn work with Anuja myself. And for this workshop, she was like the right person, and she said yes to join us and facilitate this workshop. So thank you, Anuja. This is wonderful. I'm really looking forward to the plan that you have. To quickly run the format for the day, first half is where Anuja presents her work to us, which also includes Lady Anandi's. I've seen the slides to know that, so you all will know why it was so exciting, and a lot more that has happened after Lady Anandi. I think we'll have questions as well after her presentation. We take a short tea break, and then there's one small exercise before lunch, which is more to do with the self. And then after lunch, we work with your own projects and project items and narratives. Is that good enough? I mean, of course, Anuja will make it more specific for you all to understand what this plan is. So over to you, Anuja. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ishita. I know that this is, kind of impersonal, looking at each other through the screens. But just before I begin, it would be nice to just put faces. So for those who are able to turn on their cameras, I would like to see you before I begin my presentation, and then during the presentation, you can put it off, and then then it'd be lovely to see you guys as much as. It's also so nice that everybody's in various spaces, and our space itself becomes a document of where we are, a map of where we operate from currently. So
yeah, and I think the kind of setup also that goes behind switching on the camera.
Who can do it? Ishita,
the kind of setup that goes behind switching on the camera, like the spaces, but the setting up of spaces.
That's right. It's a new way of looking at mise-en-scène and how we imagine performance making, but I won't talk about that today. So we are 18 people, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So maybe some people are joining us late, or somebody might have dropped out. So I'll just check my messages.
Yeah, no worries, because according to our time, I thought from 10 to just 10:10, we can just have a quick round of who you are. I read most of your projects, and I have to say, I feel like a peer and I feel like a colleague, and I'm as excited to listen to what you guys have to say, because I don't believe in sort of patriarchal unidimensional art practice. My art practice is really a collaborative community building art practice. So I'm really curious to hear how you look at your work and to facilitate a sort of synergetic way of thinking through archives. So I'm going to start my presentation. I want to time it at 35 minutes and no longer. And then I want to spend a good 20 minutes with questions. So it'll be nice if you do the questions later, or you can moderate the questions, Ishita, rather than them coming in the middle of the presentation. Otherwise, it'll go on.
Yeah, so we have shared a Google Doc link with everyone, and we'll share it once again right now.
That's
so
fine.
Everybody's requested to put the questions there, and then we'll take it up after you finish.
Yeah, that would be nice. So then we don't go on forever. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, I started my timer. Hopefully I can keep some time. So who am I? I've run a theatre company since 2015 called Drama Queen. And the name itself should give you some ideas about what I'm interested in, what I do. I really wanted to think about the notion of gender, feminism, storytelling, alternate sexuality. And so I claimed the title Drama Queen. This is from my show Lady Anandi. I'll talk about it in detail. So I'm Drama Queen since 2015. Drama Queen is a documentary theatre company. Now, documentary theatre itself in India is sort of new. It's a form that I enjoy, and I'll talk about it a little bit. So Drama Queen is interested in personal histories, archival absences, and to extend the idea of theatre to create audacious work. Theatre in India is still stuck in British colonial history and the proscenium. Of course, not folk theatre, but urban English theatre. So I really want to make audacious theatre work and extend the boundary of what we understand as theatre making in India. My work also focuses on undocumented narratives, gender in performance. Increasingly over the last 3 years, I'm interested in technology, sites, even social media sites, and iterations around form and process are critical. So I often make the form of making my performance apparent to the audience. I don't like finished, clean products. I like messy, loose structures where I make things apparent. And the most important element in my performance making is the audience. I feel like the audience is complicit in my performance making. Again, in conventional theater, the audience sits in an auditorium, the performer is on stage, and there is a hierarchy which bothers me. I want to put agency back into the hands of the audience that comes to watch my shows. And I'm interested in this complex relationship. And the audience has been extremely playful while they partake of my work and create or help me create my work. Yeah. So these are the important aspects of my performance making work. And as you can see, archives are critical. So when I say documentary theatre and when I say document, I certainly just don't mean the paper document. And this is also something for archives to think of, to work with. And I was happy to hear somebody said, Johan said that he's working with the archive of ephemera. So for me, the document is image, memory, metaphor, gesture. And recently I've even added medium. So what is the medium by which we communicate? Is it a live performance? Is it social media? Is it video? So I'm also interested on the medium as document. So this is my broad understanding of document. So I'll tell you how I came to performance making. I came to performance making at 34. I mean, I've always acted, but I was never a full-time actor. At 34, I decided to give up everything. I had been working in the arts all my life, though, at India Foundation for the Arts, and I worked with Experimenta, which is a film festival. I decided to give it all up and become an actress. But I was quite surprised that at 34, when I came to it, I was typecast. So I was this woman who was ironing clothes. I was the matron because at 34, I'm a big person. I like to claim my space. I have a slightly deeper voice, and I was constantly told by mainstream theatre directors who cast me in these roles that I am not woman enough. And first I thought it was really funny. And then I started to think that actually it's quite sinister what they're saying about my body, what they're saying about me as a woman performer. And then I started to get that most of the plays we were doing in India were written by male playwrights, and the directors were male, and there was the actress who was following their rules or saying their words. So I felt a deep sense of discomfort and almost an anger towards this. This image is from a film that I love. So I understood that there's a hierarchy between the male playwright, the male director, and then the actress. And I now don't say actress, I like to say actor. And it was with this sense of controlling my narrative that I started looking at the stories that exist in my family. I had already done an oral history project with my grandfather, who used to be a makeup artist in the film industry. And it was a story of a technician. And I started delving a bit deeper, and I realized that his father, so my mother's father's father, who you see in the picture in the mustache behind, ran a theatre company. And this is a play that was banned. And what was interesting is that he used to play women characters in plays. And I started to think that what does it mean for him to be a woman on stage, for me to be a woman on stage? And he was constantly being told that he's not a good enough woman actor. So it complicated the notions of gender for me in my head. And I created a refrain. Two actors. Is somebody saying something? Okay. Two actors separated by 100 years. My great-grandfather and me. And one struggling to be a woman on stage, that's me. And he is a glorious woman. You'll see in a red sari and how he presents the notion of quote-unquote woman. And in the absence of, I found about 20 photographs. And in the absence of photographs, I started to imagine that can my body perhaps be an archive? Can my body unravel the mysteries of my ancestors if you cut deep into my skin? So what are the stories we might carry? What are the stories that our body carries of violence, of injustice, of sorrow? And I wanted to make that apparent in my performance making. So there were two ideas that, he's a man trying to be a woman on stage, the violence that the directors had inflicted on my body, a performing body, and what is the place of my body in storytelling, in archiving, in questioning history. And when I started looking for my great-grandfather, he was missing from the archive. Like I said, I found 20 photographs. In Marathi theatre history, there is little to no mention of him. His brother, who's the director, producer, and played mostly male characters, is written about. Then I started to wonder who goes missing from the archive. What can my body put back into the missing archive? And what was interesting to me was that in the imitation of gestures that I found in the 20 photographs, I failed. I could never be woman enough. And then I started to make my failure apparent in all my performances. And what I was doing is I was trying to imitate him playing a woman. I was trying to imitate him playing the man. You saw the first photograph, me trying to, imitate him with a mustache. And I started inserting myself in the projected photographs, the few archival photographs that I found. So that's him in the red sari. And often my body, now the 42-year-old body, I still do this performance. I insert myself. My body becomes a site for projection. So you see, I'm constantly drawing the audience's attention to his photographs, to my body in between it. How do we remember the past? Often when we think about archival collections, we look at it with great nostalgia. Archives have a sense of beauty. And my body, with all its folds and curves and my big stomach, was interrupting that archive. The beautiful hand-painted photograph that you saw before, I placed myself in order to question, how do we remember? What is standing in front of you? Because one review also said, oh, the actor has such an ungainly body. And of course, that's depressing, but it reflected more in the way with which people perceive women's bodies in relation to, let's even say, an archival body, right? So Lady Anandi becomes an iteration, of course, on archives, on the body. And of course, it's a story that is told playfully, because where I stopped finding any material on him, I started to write fiction. So where history stopped, fiction intervened. I'm a great one for fictionalizing history. I mean, if the powers that be do it, I think we as individual storytellers need to challenge a certain telling of the history. So I insert myself, as you see, I try to capture various body parts on my own flawed performer's body. So this you see. So the photo on the left is the archival photograph, and that man in the red sari is my great-grandfather. And that's me inserting myself. And my shadows often fall on his photograph, really talking about who gets to tell their story, whose story are we telling, what is the course of the narrative that we want to take, what does the photograph tell us? And incidentally, in this photograph, I play both. I first become his older brother who's screaming, and his mustache comes on my face, his kamarband comes on my face, and then I go and imitate my great-grandfather's gesture of holding the sari. And a voice is heard saying, lower, bend down, put your gaze down, believe you're a real woman, is what is said to me. And I keep saying, believe I'm a real woman, as if I need to reiterate that to myself. Yeah, this is another image. And Lady Anandi traveled across India independently, and I didn't have a director, and the audience becomes really important because I started presenting it as a work in progress, and I said, this is unfinished work. And the interesting bit is that all the fiction scenes that I've written, I read them. So there's an alienation the audience feels, and all the research bits, I recount as if it were a dialogue. So that really throws the audience off. One critic who's entrenched in certain ways of looking at theatre said, but madam, why do you keep reading? And I said to him very cheekily, I said, because I can't remember the lines. And he's like, oof. But the joke was on him because he forgot that I'm the playwright. So it's also for me to provoke and receive notions of what theatre can be. And the form is deliberately loose, and I feel my form of documentary theatre is feminist, because what I've seen some of my male, and I'm sorry to use this binary category for this project, but I'm commenting on a certain way of making theatre. They like finished products. And what I was sharing with them was a certain vulnerability. I bring attention to my belly, to my voice, to my hair, because I have thinner hair than most people would like. And I bring attention to that in the play. And it is about me sharing my vulnerability. It is not aspiring towards perfection. And so Lady Anandi now has had over 50 shows. It's been written about, but more than performance, I see Lady Anandi as archival intervention and an intervention of the personal archive where there is hardly any material. And I turn to fiction and I turn to my body as sources of rewriting this history or reclaiming history. Yeah, and I mean, Lady Anandi was my first performance project, but I've been working in archives for a long time. And this is a statement that I really want to put out there. I do believe that archives are really sexy, because when you talk to people, people think archives are dusty places, unchanging places. And if they're not sexy, we should make them sexy. There was an artist who said to something I was curating, saying, long live the archive that misbehaves. I'm a big one for misbehavior. I'm badly behaved. And this photo is very provocative. It's from Lady Anandi. And I do think archives can be sexy if we intervene. If archives are not just sites that are used as repositories, but if retrieval is made possible, if we allow that archive to misbehave, especially institutional state archives. And I'm putting this out as a provocation. Of course, we can talk through this, and it's a fairly mature group, as I understand. So what happens when an archive misbehaves? Just stay with that thought. So I wanted to put it out there that archives are sexy, and I want to put sexy back in the archives, yeah? And this is something that I work with quite a lot. And this is what I was saying earlier. I share the vulnerability of my body, of my stories, my failings sometimes as a performer, because I'm interested in making freer art. I'm not interested in making perfect art. And this is an experimental filmmaker whose work I love, and he says, I want to make less perfect but freer films. And I feel that's true for me. I want to make less perfect but freer theater. And that's an idea I try to carry through most of my work. And this idea of freedom for me is located in the body, is located in the idea of sharing vulnerability. And it comes with a caveat, and I can explain why I'm putting an asterisk on sharing vulnerability later. But just to continue with this chain of thought, I feel like that change and that pushback can come when we work with little histories. For me, Lady Anandi very much was a little history of this 34-year-old actress who people didn't care about, who didn't know, but was challenging the grand narrative of the state. And now through all of my work, I try to gather little histories. And I do believe my work is political, but there's a strong aesthetic element to my work as well. So this brings me to my second project called The Reading Room. So I really want you to think of the little histories. The Reading Room to me is my favorite project because there is no actor. I decided to do away with actors. The audience is the performer. There is no script. I asked the audience to bring letters from their personal collections. And I curate letters from the public domain. And we don't do it in a theater. We have done reading room in bookstores, in homes, on terraces, classrooms. An architect in Bombay actually invited me to their office, in bedrooms. And what's most exciting to me is that the audience members read with accents, read with trepidation, read with mistakes, and they read with their vulnerabilities. Unlike the actor, who projects his or her or their voice. And Reading Room becomes a performance that is incredibly fragile. So I don't perform. I call myself the postmistress, and I sit and I listen. And it's quite simple. People sit in a circle and they read, but they don't read their own letters. There's a little bit of a twist. They read somebody else's letters. And it's, I think, quite a charged experience because people get to be actors. They get to hear their texts. So they get to be playwrights in a way. And of course, they have to look under their beds or call up their grandmothers and bring a letter. And they have to work with the materiality of paper. And we found that a lot of people can't even read handwriting anymore. People can't use or touch paper delicately because somebody brought butter paper once and they almost tore it. So it brings out a whole lot of idea around the document, the archival document. And at the end of the reading room, I asked these people to donate their letters to me. I've been doing this project since 2016, and now I have about 100 letters that people have trusted me with, complete strangers. And there's no compulsion. If they don't want to share the letter, it's fine. They donate the letters to me. Then I take some of these letters into my next reading room. So a nice ephemeral sort of archive is beginning to form of people's letters. And when they came to the reading room, it was charged because their breathing body was around to share it. So now what happens to these letters? They carry their own history. And I really wanted to break the idea of the playwright. And therefore, when reading room happens, there's a collective authorship. And the evening of the reading room is as good or bad as the people who come. So I've given up complete control as a director. And like I said, the audience is complicit and they have agency. And they make these small archival interventions in their homes and then come and trust me with these letters. So this is peppered across the room. It says, listen, read, leave, talk less, read more, write more. This is peppered across the room for whichever room we do reading room in. So this was in somebody's home. This is a painter. So they gave me this for free, their venue. And I lay out the letters like this and I hand it to them. It's a ritual, small ritual, because I'm the postmistress. This is in a bookstore in Bangalore, Kalata Galata. They get 5 minutes to read the letters. And each person reads like 3 letters. It's not just one. That was Lightroom. This is Atagalata bookstore. This is the architect's office in Bombay. And this is the butter paper that this gentleman couldn't touch properly. This is another venue. this is one of the hardest performances I've done because I become the holder of that space, and one has to be very careful because people get emotional. I would continue to reiterate that this is a performance because people have asked me, is it a therapy session? And I say no, because I'm not a therapist, I'm a performance maker. This brings me to a project that I did in January 2020. It was called Everything Moves. There is an archive in Hyderabad called the Kalakriti Archive, which has beautiful old photographs of the city of Hyderabad. You know, somebody said they have a project working in Sikandarabad. So they wanted me to work with archival photographs of Hyderabad, of the Nizam. And I called this project Everything Moves. And I worked with children because I wanted to see how children look at history, how they look upon the past, because we often impose our ideas about what came before us quite emphatically on children. And this is one of the examples. And I want to state here that the school I worked with is Focus High School in the old city of Hyderabad in a little area called Darul Shifa. It's full of, you know, these kids are all practicing shares, and they were looking at the history and these photographs of the Nizam, and we played with it. So they inserted themselves using, like you can see, paper plates, chart paper, notebooks, to see what was possible, how they could dismantle, and this is the original photograph, how they could dismantle this kind of image. Which the Kalakriti archive is quite proud of. So we wanted to playfully, a lot of my work is really playful, tear down this image. And then the children started telling stories of who they thought these characters were, and it became fantastical. It had no bearing in the real history, whatever that means, of the city of Hyderabad or of the Nizam. They also took me on a walk of the neighborhood in Darul Shifa. And I want to just punctuate, this thing here and say that January 2020, India saw a great eruption of public protests against the CAA and NRC. And these children were just taking to the streets. It was their quiet way of talking about what was happening. So I don't know if you can hear it. This is one of the things they did with a photograph we found. This is from the performance.
Do you think what else we can do with this? I have an idea.
This is Purani Haveli.
Time travel.
And this performance is called Everything Moves because we were working with photographs, and the refrain is everything moves, especially history. Interestingly, this school is composed of a very diverse bunch of children. So this boy who you will hear singing, he originally comes from Iran, and the children were telling us what they think of the Charminar, which is, the significant monument in the landscape of the city. And all the children started writing their songs about what they thought the Charminar was. And this boy, Mehdi, felt like he was an outsider. He's like, "Mujhe nahi pata. These people keep saying Charminar is something." So then he wrote a rap in Farsi around the Charminar. I can't translate it for you, but he basically says, this is this colored monument. And we ended our performance with a Farsi rap. Yeah, so the different children sang versions of what or who they thought the Charminar was, and all of them claimed to say, "Main hu Charminar." Because often what happens in the way we look at heritage or the way we're looking at photographs and archival photographs, we tend to revere them And that reverence for a certain while is great. But like I was saying, when we work with children, it's quite important to allow them the fantasy of fiction in looking at the historical monument, because it's easier then to relate with it. And what they did was actually quite political in the way they were claiming a monument for themselves versus just reading in history books what they were told about the monuments. History is the grand narrative with which we work, and we need to keep puncturing it. Sorry, I'll go to the next one. Okay, just taking a breath here because this is slightly different as a project that I did, and I come to the idea of the archive quite circuitously here. I started the Lonely Hearts Club on the 25th of March, which is the first day of the lockdown in India. And this project unfolds on Instagram. So I decided to invite readers, listeners of my own Instagram page to send in gender positive queer erotica. I wanted people to reclaim narratives around the body, around intimacy, and the news was telling us the body's under attack. I wanted people to spend 10 minutes at night enjoying themselves, thinking about pleasure. And it became quite an interesting and a popular project. The narratives that we got were extremely provocative. And I used hashtags. So I wanted to subvert the algorithm where we says orgasm and morning glory. But when they come to the site, actually, you see, writings by Arundhati Roy, or there's Dalit poetry, or there's Audre Lorde, or there's Sufi queer poetry. So drawing the audience here, and these images are images that, again, the readers sent me. And the idea is that you come to Instagram, and when you're at Instagram scrolling, you stop at this image and you click on it, but then there's a black screen for 5 minutes. So Medium, the social media site that is very, very audio, that is very image driven, you stop and you listen. Can we just take a pause? And now it has its own page. You all can go follow it. Luckily, so far, I haven't gotten into trouble because there's quite provocative poetry and text, and people sent in their own desires, and they can send whatever images they like. There's only one person who sent in an anonymous entry because her social structure, her religious structure doesn't allow her to talk about sexuality openly. So there's one anonymous entry, but otherwise everybody else put their names on the entries they sent. And it's called the Lonely Hearts Club, and I'm happy if anybody wants to send entries. And the reason I put this in this archiving presentation is because now the 52 entries that exist on Lonely Hearts Club became an archive of those days of the pandemic. It started on 25th of March and it went on in full steam right up to the first week of June. Now it's less and less, but in my mind it becomes an archive of those nights. One night the count was really going up, and a young girl sent a poem about making love to death. And I really had to think twice, should I be sharing this? And I said, yes, we must, because we have to look at this notion a little bit more closely. We have to be able to examine it. So please check it out. It's rather playful. It's quite provocative. And really people have trusted me again. The strangers have trusted me with this kind of gender positive queer work. Yeah. And this is what I just want to close with. I'm doing okay for time, I suppose. Yeah, I want to close with, this is a commission project that somebody asked me to do, First Post asked me to do for Zoom. And I'm quite critical of this 3x4 box, but I also see the potentiality of the internet and what it enables, but also what it doesn't allow for. I decided to work with 4 young artists. 2 filmmakers and 2 performers. And they had to write about sexuality, religion, language, surveillance, imagining as if it was 2070. So I said 2070 is 50 years from now, the year is 0, and what happens? What happens to all of this? And while I was researching, some of you might know Ursula Le Guin is a science fiction feminist writer. I love her work because she talks about technology saying that why do certain sort of patriarchal structures talk about technology just as the internet or the computer, but what we wear is technology. How we drink from a bottle is technology. So Ursula Le Guin says the future is now. The future is not something that's far away. And then, therefore, I started to think that I want to create an archive for tomorrow. And therefore, this performance was called For Tomorrow. It's 26 minutes of very fragmented work. It's extremely experimental work, which is why I didn't share the link with you people. It's 2.5 minutes of performance work. I think there's a very interesting kiss in the show, etc. But I started to think that these 4 young people are sharing their bodies, sharing their stories in 2020. And when we look back on it, For Tomorrow will tell us the story of these 4 young people. And that's what For Tomorrow was. And we were also making fun of, sorry if you guys have done it, but we were making fun of people who were doing Zoom birthday parties, etc., etc. And it ends actually with this image, which one of the performers brought. As you can see, it's a gorgeous photograph. And this is how the photograph exists. In his home, he's Bori. And it ended by saying that we are stuck in this 3x4 box and we communicate through our dreams and in our sleep. And this was a nice meta image or a nice parenthesis about the existence of all of us on Zoom or on Google Meets or wherever. So For Tomorrow ends with this. Of course, I've made another performance since then, but I don't want to talk about it, with the students in Hyderabad. I made something with them called Along the Lines, which happened on 17th October, which is again about technology, about the children sharing their homes with us. But this is For Tomorrow, an archive for the future. This I just want to end with. Would anyone want to read this? Would one of you read this for me? Anybody?
What seems the most...
Yes.
Okay. What seems the most ephemeral and fragile may, in fact, be the most enduring. Flesh fades, diminishes, and dies on the breath and through the performing body. Story keeps its airy lightness and flooding, force suggesting one possibility of life beyond Earth.
Death.
In this
Life beyond
sense,
death.
Life beyond death. In this sense, memory endures, paradoxically, because it moves. Only through movement can memory take up residence and build up a dwelling place within us. As sites of accumulation, we become shelters or living archives for memory. Our bodies hold a myriad of incomplete pieces, the presence of which we are sometimes unaware.
I really want all of us to also stay with that thought, even if you're working with institutional archives, if you're working with personal archives, that we carry with us incomplete pieces and the presence of which we are sometimes unaware. And this is from a book, I can share the PDF. It's about oral history and performance making. And this quote goes on to say that sometimes these pieces cut through our skin. It bleeds, but it also gives us a sense that they exist, that these pieces exist. And I just want to read it once more so that this stays with us and we take it through to our next exercise. Our bodies hold a myriad of incomplete pieces, the presence of which we are sometimes unaware. Another important thought. Only through movement can memory take up residence and build a dwelling place within us. As sites of accumulation, we become shelters or living archives for memory. And to leave you with what we want to do through the rest of the day, it's from the same book, and it's a really powerful book on oral history performance edited by Della Pollock. And this is the title of my workshop today, A story is not a story until it is told. It is not told until it is heard. Once it is heard, it changes. A story is not a story until it changes. For me, it's really important that as archivists, as performance makers, we enable the changing of stories. Because if we keep it an unchanging story, then I'm afraid we might fall into some of the traps that grand narratives, that right-wing governments, that states want us to fossilize and keep as the pure word in history. So a story is not a story until it changes. So today my workshop is about me hearing your stories and how they might change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anuja. That was very provocative, very inspiring. And really opens us up, right? So for the workshop, if I might say, the first 2 months, where it has been disciplined, just to contrast the word, and now you come in here and you tell us to misbehave. I think that's just what we needed. I can see everybody smiling, so I'm just speaking on behalf of them so that it comes to you as one voice.
I'm saying it's okay to misbehave because they look like such a mature lot. I mean, if we were 13 years old, then I would say, come on, bring in some discipline. But it's a very, it's a disciplined bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the 2 months of workshop. Also, I've been giving them ideas on Excel sheets and organizing, on cataloging what an archive would call for. So it must be very liberating for them now to be able to say, okay, hell with all of that.
So good. So you've taught them the rules. Now we break them. So you got the right person. And I kept my time at 35 minutes.
Okay, let's do the break then.